The city lights of Istanbul shimmered softly across the Bosphorus as the evening rain painted the streets silver. Inside a quiet bookstore cafe near the old harbor, people whispered over warm drinks while gentle music floated through the air. It was the kind of evening that made strangers feel connected without speaking a single word. Barış Arduç sat near the window, turning the pages of a novel he had already read twice before. He wasn't truly reading anymore. His thoughts had been wandering for weeks. Fame, interviews, crowded sets, and endless cameras had filled his days, yet something inside him still felt incomplete. Across the cafe, the door slowly opened. A cool breeze entered first. Then came Elçin Sangu. She stepped inside quietly, holding an umbrella decorated with tiny white flowers. Her soft smile appeared for only a second as she thanked the waiter near the entrance. She looked tired from the rain, yet her presence somehow brightened the entire room. Barris noticed her immediately. Not because she was famous, not because everyone admired her, but because, in that strange moment, it felt as if the world had suddenly gone silent. Elkin walked toward the bookshelves, carefully running her fingers across the covers, as if every story carried a hidden memory. She stopped near the poetry section, searching for something she couldn't quite find. Barris looked away quickly, pretending to focus on his book again, but fate had already begun writing its own story. A few minutes later, Elkin approached the empty chair near his table. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Is anyone sitting here?" Barris looked up, surprised for a moment, before smiling politely. "No," he replied. "Please." She sat down, placing two books beside her coffee cup. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain outside continued falling softly against the glass windows. Then Elson glanced at the novel in his hands. "That's one of my favorite books," she said. Barris smiled faintly. "Mine too. Even after reading it twice?" He laughed quietly. "Maybe some stories feel different every time." Elkin nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what he meant. Their conversation began simply. Books, movies, childhood dreams, favorite places in Istanbul. But somehow, every sentence felt natural, effortless, almost familiar. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The cafe slowly emptied as the night deepened around them. At one point, Elkin looked outside and realized the rain had stopped. "Oh no," she said softly. "I didn't even notice the time." "Neither did I," Barris admitted. For a brief second, silence returned between them. But this silence felt warm, comfortable, like two hearts recognizing each other before the mind could understand why. As they stood near the entrance, preparing to leave, Elkin smiled politely. "It was nice talking with you tonight." Barris hesitated. He wasn't usually nervous around people, but something about her made every word feel important. "It really was," he replied. Outside, the streets glowed beneath the reflections of the city lights. Cars moved slowly through the damp roads, while the cold night air carried the scent of the sea. They walked together for a short distance. Neither seemed eager to say goodbye. Near the corner of a quiet street, Elson stopped. "I should go this way," she said. Barris nodded, though part of him wished the road continued longer. Then, unexpectedly, Elkin smiled again. "Maybe we'll meet again someday." Before he could answer, she turned gently and disappeared into the glowing streets of Istanbul. Barris stood there for several seconds, watching the empty road ahead. For the first time in many years, his heart felt strangely awake. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her voice remained in his mind, her smile, the way she listened carefully to every word, and most of all, the feeling that their meeting had not been accidental. Meanwhile, in her apartment overlooking the city, Elson sat near her balcony with a cup of tea growing cold beside her. She tried reading the poetry book she had bought earlier, but her thoughts kept returning to the quiet man from the cafe. There had been kindness in his eyes, a calmness she rarely found in people anymore. And somehow, she felt as though she had known him long before that evening. Days passed. Life became busy again. Barris returned to filming schedules and interviews. Elson focused on new projects and meetings. But destiny, once awakened, does not easily disappear. One afternoon, both of them unexpectedly arrived at the same charity event for children's education in Istanbul. The large hall buzzed with photographers, reporters, and guests. Barris entered from one side of the building, while Elton walked through the opposite entrance. And then their eyes met across the crowded room. For a second, everything around them seemed distant. Elton smiled first. A real smile. The kind that appears naturally when seeing someone unexpectedly important. Barris walked toward her slowly. "I guess destiny was listening," he said warmly. Elson laughed softly. "Maybe it was." The event organizers soon asked them to sit together for photographs and interviews. Everyone noticed how naturally they spoke with one another. There was no awkwardness, no forced conversation, only comfort. As if their connection had already existed long before either of them realized it. During the event, a little girl approached their table shyly. "Are you two best friends?" she asked innocently. Barris and Elkin exchanged surprised glances before laughing gently. Elton bent slightly toward the child. "We just met recently." The little girl smiled brightly. "Well, you look like people who were meant to meet." Then she ran off happily before either of them could respond. But her words remained in the air. People who were meant to meet. Later that evening, after the event ended, Barris and Elson walked outside together once more. The sunset painted the sky gold and pink above the Bosphorus. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Barris looked toward the sea quietly. "Do you ever feel like some moments are already written before they happen?" Elton turned toward him thoughtfully. "Yes," she answered softly. "And sometimes those moments change everything." Their eyes met again, and deep inside both of them, something beautiful quietly began. Something neither fame nor time could explain. A connection built not only from admiration, but from understanding, from destiny, from a feeling that this story had started long before either of them opened that cafe door on a rainy evening in Istanbul. And neither of them knew yet that this unforgettable story was only beginning. The following weeks passed like pages from a beautiful novel neither of them wanted to end. Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu continued meeting through unexpected moments that slowly stopped feeling accidental. Sometimes it was during events, sometimes in quiet cafes hidden within the old streets of Istanbul, and sometimes it was only a short phone call late at night after long working hours. Yet every conversation seemed to bring them closer, not quickly, not loudly, but in a calm and meaningful way that felt rare in their busy lives. One evening, Barris invited Elson to a peaceful hill overlooking the Bosphorus. The city below sparkled like thousands of tiny stars, while soft evening winds moved through the trees surrounding them. Elson looked around with a smile. "This place is beautiful," she whispered. Barris nodded. "I come here whenever life feels too noisy." She looked at him carefully after hearing those words. Despite his success, she could see a quiet loneliness hidden behind his calm smile. It was the kind of loneliness people carried when the world constantly watched them but rarely understood them. Elton understood it because she carried the same feeling herself. They sat beside each other on a wooden bench, while the sunset slowly disappeared into shades of orange and deep blue. "Do you ever miss normal life?" Elson asked softly. Barris thought for a moment before answering. "Sometimes. I miss simple moments, walking somewhere without cameras, talking without people creating stories about every word." Elson smiled faintly. "Yes, I understand that." Silence followed again, but this silence had become something special between them. It no longer felt empty. It felt safe. Barris turned slightly toward her. You know, he said quietly, talking with you feels different. Elkin's heart skipped softly, though she remained calm. Different how? He smiled gently. Peaceful. Her eyes lowered for a moment, touched by the honesty in his voice. No dramatic promises, no perfect speeches, just truth. And sometimes truth is far more powerful. As the evening grew colder, they walked slowly through the nearby streets filled with glowing lanterns and small bookstores. Istanbul seemed almost magical at night, as if the city itself wanted to protect their growing connection. At one small shop, Elkin stopped suddenly near the window. Barris noticed her expression. What is it? She pointed toward an old music box displayed behind the glass. When I was little, she said softly, my grandmother had one just like that. Barris watched her carefully as she smiled at the memory. She used to tell me that life always brings certain people together for a reason, Elsin continued. At the time, I thought it was only a beautiful story. And now? Barris asked quietly. Elsin looked at him. Now I'm not so sure it was only a story. For a moment, the world around them disappeared again. Only the two of them remained beneath the warm city lights. Days later, they began working together on a special television project. The news spread quickly across social media, and fans everywhere became excited to see them together again. But behind the cameras, something deeper continued growing. They supported each other during exhausting filming days. They shared coffee during breaks. They laughed over forgotten lines and small mistakes. And slowly, they became each other's favorite part of every day. One rainy afternoon during filming, the electricity suddenly went out inside the old studio building. Crew members waited while technicians tried fixing the problem. The hall became quiet, except for the sound of rain outside. Elsin sat near a window, watching water slide across the glass. Barris walked over, holding 2 cups of tea. I thought you might be cold, he said. She accepted the tea with a grateful smile. Thank you. The emergency lights around the studio glowed softly, creating shadows across the empty set. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Elkin looked at him carefully. Can I ask you something honestly? Of course. Why do I feel like I've known you much longer than I actually have? Barris smiled quietly. I've been wondering the same thing. She laughed softly, though emotion filled her eyes. It's strange. Maybe not, Barris replied gently. Some people enter our lives slowly. Others feel familiar from the beginning. Elkin lowered her gaze again, holding the warm cup between her hands. His words stayed in her heart long after the lights returned. As weeks turned into months, the connection between them became impossible to ignore. Friends noticed it. Co-workers noticed it. Even strangers could feel the warmth between them. Yet both remained careful, not because they were unsure, but because what they shared felt too meaningful to rush. One evening, after filming ended, Barris and Elsin walked beside the Bosphorus once more. The sea reflected the moonlight beautifully, while distant boats moved silently across the water. The city around them felt peaceful, almost dreamlike. Barris suddenly stopped walking. Elsin. She turned toward him slowly. For the first time since meeting her, he looked nervous. There's something I need to tell you. Her heartbeat quickened slightly. Barris looked into her eyes with complete honesty. Before you came into my life, everything felt temporary. Work, success, fame. It all moved so fast that I forgot what truly mattered. Elsin listened silently. But when I'm with you, he continued softly, life feels real again. The wind moved gently through the night air between them. Elkin could see sincerity in every word he spoke. No performance, no pretending, only truth. And truth has a way of reaching directly into the heart. You changed something inside me, Barris admitted quietly. For several seconds, Elsin couldn't speak. Emotion filled her chest so deeply that words suddenly felt too small. Finally, she smiled through shining eyes. You changed something inside me too. Their eyes remained locked together beneath the moonlight, and in that unforgettable moment, neither of them needed another explanation. Because some feelings speak louder than words ever could. Far away, the lights of Istanbul continued glowing across the dark water. The city moved forward like always. But for Barris and Elsin, time itself seemed to pause, as if destiny had finally brought two hearts exactly where they were always meant to be. And neither of them realized yet that the greatest challenge of their story was still waiting ahead.